When working Japanese short rows flat across a piece, meaning all on the knit side or all on the wrong side, so that your fabric biases, you have to treat the knit side a little bit differently than you do the purl side. So you can see here I've cast on at the bottom straight, and then I did an entire series of short rows that tilted it this way or caused the fabric to bias. And then I went back the other way. On the wrong side, this is what it would look like. I've left the stitch markers in for clarity, so you can see what I'm talking about. Obviously, you wouldn't leave them in long term. So we'll start with the knit side or the right side. We're assuming that you are doing stockinette stitch. So knit would be your right side. And you're going to knit the first 3 stitches, or if you're following a pattern that you're replacing a wrap and turn short row, you would knit the number of stitches that it says before the wrap and turn. So if your pattern said knit 3, wrap and turn, you would knit 3, and you take an open locking stitch marker, and you want to pick one that actually closes. Don't use those little lowercase e shaped ones, because if they fall out, it's really very difficult. And you put that right onto your yarn and make sure that it moves freely. Then you turn it to the wrong side. There is no wrap. This stitch marker is going to hold the place where our wrap will go. Now we're going to slip 1 stitch purlwise with the yarn in front and purl to the end of the row. On the next knit row, we're going to knit to the gap, and if you look at the needle, you can see the gap where the previous turn happened. There's a bigger space. If you can't see the gap because your yarn is too fluffy, look for the stitch marker. See it there? That is the last stitch you're going to knit. So we're going to knit up to and including the stitch that has the stitch marker on it. So I'm going to knit 3. And now I'm going to insert the tip of my right needle into the next stitch on the left, and I'm going to use the stitch marker to pull slightly up to create this loop and place that loop onto the tip of my right needle as well. I'm going to knit, and I'm going to pull back through that loop and through the stitch that was on the needle. That's your wrap and turn stitch. So if your pattern said to clean up the wrap and turn and then do or knit the stitch together with its wrap, depending on how the wording is phrased, and then to knit so many stitches beyond it, after having done this, you will knit however many stitches it says beyond it. So I'm going to knit 2 more. And now I'm going to place another stitch marker right on the thread, right around it so it freely moves. And I'm going to turn it to the wrong side. You want to slide the stitch marker right up against the work as tight as you can get it to go. And then you're going to slip 1 stitch purlwise with the yarn in front and purl to the end of the row. I'm going to do 1 more, and then I'm going to illustrate what you do to finish off the row when your short rows are complete. So we're going to turn it over and we're going to knit to the gap. And again, you can see the gap usually pretty clearly, but if not, look for the stitch marker. That'll tell you where to go. And I'm going to knit all the way to the marked stitch and including the marked stitch. So I have knit the marked stitch. Now I'm going to take my right hand needle into the next stitch on the left and also tilt it forward so you can see it. Grab a hold of that last stitch marker that you placed, pull up a small loop and stick that onto your right hand needle as well, and knit the 2 of those together. Knit to the last or to the next wrap and turn, or until you're ready to do the next one. So I'm going to knit 2. I'm going to place the next stitch marker right onto the yarn, turn around and purl across. slip the first stitch with the yarn in front and the stitch marker close to the work, as close as you can get it. You don't have to pull that stitch particularly tight, so don't snag your yarn and yank on it as you turn, but you don't want it to be very, very loose. Now as I work my final knit row, assuming I've completed all of my knit side short rows, you can see the fabric is starting to go back this way, and I've got this weird little bump. As I come across for the final time, when I hit the gap, I'm going to clean up that last loop and then continue on across the row. So I'm going to knit 9. That takes me to my marked stitch. And then I'm going to knit the next stitch to the left together with the loop that I pull up with this stitch marker. As you pull up the loop, you want to make sure that you're not twisting it. Can you see how this is open at the bottom? You don't want to be doing one of these numbers and making a pretzel out of it. Just pull a nice open loop up, knit it together with the stitch, and then just knit to the end of the row. All of your short rows on the knit side are now complete, and you should be able to look at it and see where your turns were. Those are right here. If I flip it to the wrong side, you can see them on here. I'm going to go ahead and finish this row and work a couple of rows, and I'll come back and illustrate the purl side. Working Japanese short rows from the purl side is just slightly different, and so I'm going to start the same way I did on the knit side by working 3 stitches. Again, if your instructions said purl so many and then wrap and turn, you would purl that many, and then you would place your stitch marker right on the working yarn, eliminate the wrap and turn the whole piece around. When you slip the stitch this time, it's again purlwise, even though we're on the knit side, but you want to slip it purlwise with the yarn in back so that that yarn stays on the wrong side of your work, and you still want to make sure your stitch marker is snugged right up against the turn as close as you can get it. Slip, knit to the end of the row. When you turn back around, you're going to purl to and including the marked stitch, or right to the gap. So I'm going to purl 3. When I work this next stitch, I'm going to go into the stitch first as if to purl, and then I'm going to pull this loop up and I'm going to place it onto my needle. Again, you don't want to twisty twist it. Keep it as open as you can. Purl, and when I purl, I'm going to pull back through both of those loops at the same time. Make sure you don't catch any part of those loops as you pull back through, and then you would purl to the next turn. So there I am. I've purled 2 more. I'm going to place another stitch marker on the work. Turn it around. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in back and the stitch marker right up as close as you can get it to your work, and then knit to the end of the row. We'll do 1 more and I'll show you how to clean it up. So I'm going to purl to the turn. I'm going to go into the next stitch to the left of the turn and pull up a loop. Again, make sure it's not twisted at the base. Put that right onto your needles and purl the 2 of them together, and then purl to the next turn. Place another stitch marker. Once you've done the pick up the loop and put it onto your needles, you can eliminate, oh, I just locked those 2 stitch markers together. Not ideal. Let's try that without. Okay, now they're free. What was I saying? Oh, you can pull the stitch markers out when you have completed the pull up the loop and work it together with the stitch part. You can pull them back out. I find them to be useful for counting how many times I have done my turns. how many short rows have I completed? So I tend to leave them in until I'm finished. If I'm using short rows in the body of my sweater, I tend to leave them in until I'm really certain that I'm done with that section, or perhaps even the entire sweater. Here I can look at it and I can say, I have turned 3 times because I have 3 stitch markers. I'm now going to clean up that final gap that's right here. I'm going to purl right to the final stitch marker, so 9. This stitch is worked just like all the other purls. I'm going to go in, purl, pull up a loop, stick it up on my needles in a way that it's not twisted, purl them together, and then I can just purl to the end of the row. When your short rows are complete and you remove the stitch markers, you'll notice that there are long floats back here. Those are the loops you pulled up to create the loop that you knitted together or purled together with your stitch. They should not affect anything, and eventually they just kind of disappear against the work. I don't find them to be obtrusive at all. Whenever you're doing this, whatever stitch you're doing, knit or purl, you want to remember that that loop you pull up, you always want to tuck in behind the stitch, so it's always on the wrong side. You don't ever want to be pulling that loop up to the public side of your knitting. There you go. Japanese short rows worked in a row, straight across, all knits or all purls. Worked in the round is a little bit different, and there will be a different video for worked in the round for those who took the class. Thanks so much. Have a great day.